This is John Charles at the 62nd Annual ASMAC Golden Score Awards. The Golden Score this year will be awarded to Dave Grusin, and the Irwin Kostal Award will be awarded to Earle Hagen. This is, oh my God, this is Sid Raymond, winner last year of the Irwin Kostal Award.
That's true.
And do you have congratulatory words or things to say about tonight?
I sure do. I must tell you that both of the people tonight, Earle Hagen and David Grusin, are my idols. I think that they are. I would fly halfway around the world to pay tribute to them. I remember the Spencer Hagen Orchestra, which was something that I used to devour, and Dave Grusin played for me when I did one of my first films out here, Stiletto. God, that was 50 years ago. Who knows when that was? And I've been a staunch admirer of these two gentlemen for many, many years.
Well, great. Well, other side is the Neil Hefti. I'm such a fan of his. I can't stand him. Anyway, but would like to say some stuff about Dave and Earle.
I've always liked Dave and Earle. The only thing that I really didn't like about them, because they were getting all the work in town when I came here. So they were actually working too much. But Dave is absolutely fantastic. I first came across him when he was doing things for Brazil '66. And I first came across Earle when he was doing the Andy Griffith Show and these kinds of things. And Earle and I were golf buddies and things of that nature. So I'm really happy to be here. So.
Well, thanks.
Is that it, John?
Okay, that's it.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you.
This is Bruce Babcock, and he has some things to say about Earle Hagen.
Well, I'm just glad that ASMAC is honoring Earle tonight. Long overdue. I worked for Earle for 2 years in the 80s as an orchestrator, and in the 70s I took his class when he still taught the class in his home, when the charge was 24 golf balls. So we go back more than 25 years. And he's the definition of a consummate professional. I don't know what more I can say. I learned everything I know from him. And there you have it.
Thanks. Bonnie Janowski. That's who you are. Anyway, so right. So you worked with Earle?
I was another one of Earle's many students, and several years ago, and I just think he's such a fine writer. He's a mentor to so many people, and he was my very first experience writing to film, ever. And it really, that was the beginning of my real interest in writing for film, and on the way to do so. And I want to give great tribute to him, to good wishes to him, and give thanks for all the time and energy he gave towards so many students and helping people get towards their careers in film scoring. And I also admire him as a writer and as a person. Just great tribute to him this evening.
Thank you.
Good evening and welcome to the first Golden Score Awards of the 21st century. Tonight it is our honor to acknowledge the work of two musical masters, Earle Hagen and Dave Grusin. Yeah. We begin our tribute to this year's Irwin Kostal Tribute Award recipient, Mr. Earle Hagen. Please welcome one of Earle's students and a wonderful composer in his own right, Mr. Bruce Babcock.
Thank you.
All yours.
Thank you, Ian. I first became aware of the name Earle Hagen from the end credits of the Andy Griffith Show when I was 9, and the Dick Van Dyke Show, which were my mother's favorite two shows and mine, and later I Spy, etc. And when I was in high school, since I played alto sax, of course I played Harlem Nocturne with the high school jazz band. Shortly after that, I heard Tom Scott play, and I turned my saxophone into a lamp and decided composing was the better way to go. I actually knew Dean Hagen before Earle. I'd met Dean when he was going to USC, and we were both studying with Paul Glass. And Earle was still teaching his class, which later became the BMI workshop. In those days, he still taught it at his home. And the tuition was 24 golf balls. And they had to be Titleist. And Earle, despite the fact that everybody else in the group was a seasoned professional, let me in, where I also met Joe Harnell. Anyway, then later I worked for Earle on two very different shows, The Dukes of Hazzard and Mickey Spillane's Mike Hammer. One show had straight eights and the other had jazz eights. But as Dean said earlier tonight, if you can work for my dad, you can work for anyone. And that is very true. And through Earle, and he later hooked me up with J.J. Johnson, who was a walking, living legend. And, you know, I found out that everybody that Earle surrounded himself was that kind of person. And one of our mutual friends was Hugo Friedhofer, who was another one of my teachers who worked with Earle. Anyway, I just wanted to say it's been my pleasure to know him now for more than 25 years. And most of what I learned about the music business and being a composer and a professional and a human being, I learned from Earle Hagen. So, thanks, Earle. And now, speaking of the BMI workshop, it's my pleasure to turn the mic over to the Senior Vice President for Film and TV Relations of BMI, Doreen Ringer-Ross.
And now the reason I've actually been invited here, which is to talk about my dear friend Earle. I had met Earle after he'd already written the book, you know, the one on film scoring, the one that many composers, including people like Alan Silvestri, confessed that they scammed their way into their first film job and then they went home and spent the whole night reading your book so they knew what to say in the meeting the next morning. He had already created most of the music for all the television shows that I, too, grew up on, just like Bruce. Make Room for Daddy, The Andy Griffith Show, The Dick Van Dyke Show, I Spy, Mod Squad. I don't mean to make you feel old or anything, but, you know, this is part of my lexicon, and I actually remember the first time I met you being so amazed that I was sitting there talking to the guy that actually did the whistle on The Andy Griffith Show. I didn't know quite how to reconcile this because as a child, you know, I always thought it was Sheriff Taylor that actually was doing the whistling while he went off to go fishing with his son Opie, so it was very confusing. Earle's work really has become an important part of the tapestry of our popular culture, and it's still going, and if you don't believe me, just watch Nick at Night. It's on constantly. In fact, when I told my 9-year-old daughter that I was coming here tonight to have dinner with the guy that did the whistle for the Andy Griffith Show, her jaw dropped open. She went, "Can you get me his autograph?" So you have to do that for me later. Once upon a time, I had asked Earle if he thought that those TV shows that he worked on actually were better than most of the stuff that had come since. And I said, Earle, am I just biased because I have all these nostalgic memories and so it's sort of glorified in my mind? And he didn't miss a beat, of course, and he said, oh no, they were absolutely better, and I'll tell you why. And then he went on to explain to me how, at that point in time, that there was this infusion of tremendous talent coming from film into the television industry of most phenomenal writers and brilliantly talented people. And not only that, but these shows had sponsors that stuck by them. You know, as long as they kept selling dog food or whatever their product was, they got to stay on the air, and they weren't subjected to the same horror that all of the TV shows are these days, where you have to come right out of the gate with an instant hit with fabulous ratings or you're out of here. And I listened to what Earle had to say, and I thought, well, I'm not sure if he's right or not. He probably is. But damn, he would make an incredible teacher. He had this incredible wisdom about how things were and how things are and the way they all come together. So shortly thereafter, we enlisted Earle and started the BMI-sponsored Earle Hagen Film Scoring Workshop, which was a workshop that lasted 10 years. And through rain or shine and smog and traffic, Earle agreed to drive to Los Angeles from his beloved desert golf course to teach other composers the craft of dramatic underscore. Ultimately, there were hundreds of amazingly talented, orchestrally based, this was important to Earle, who benefited from Earle's incredible selflessness and generosity. Earle, you'd be so proud of some of your favorite students. I know Carlos Rodriguez, who's here tonight, his work was commissioned by the LA Philharmonic. And Lucas Richmond is now the conductor in residence, I think, at the Pittsburgh Symphony and teaching BMI's conducting workshop. And Jake Heggie, remember him? I just came back from San Francisco this weekend where I saw him get 2 standing ovations for the Dead Man Walking opera that he just wrote, and it's now being commissioned by about 6 other opera companies around the country so far. So you had a real eye for talent, and you had much to do with developing, I think, this whole generation of talent that's trying to follow in your footsteps anyway. So I can't thank you enough for all of that. I think the most impressive thing about you, in addition to being a wonderful golfer and a husband and a father and an incredible fisherman and shopper, is that Earle always has been and still is amazingly supportive of other people's talent, which is such an incredible gift. He walks the walk, you know, he doesn't just talk the talk. I'm so proud to call you my friend, Earle, and I'm so proud to be here tonight to congratulate you on this prestigious award. Good for you.
Thank you, Bruce and Doreen. I do have a letter from somebody who couldn't be here, which I'll read to Earle. Dear Earle, you probably don't remember me from the Army Air Force radio unit days. But after all this time, I have to tell you that I learned a lot from your expertise with arranging and orchestrating in those days. I am happy to have my voice to the award, and I'm only sorry that I can't be there to see you receive it. All the best, Elmer Bernstein. Yeah. Now I'm doing my first fill-in, as usual. I think this always happens every year. I didn't want to be doing this for a wonderful gentleman, Joe Harnell, who unfortunately went into hospital last Monday for what was meant to be a fairly normal procedure. And something went wrong. He's okay, evidently he's over the hump now. But it turned a little, we were all very anxious for a couple of days. But this was going to be Joe's moment with Earle, because Joe had one big hit record called Fly Me to the Moon. There was a song on the B side of that record. Just happened to be called Harlem Nocturne. Guess who wrote that? So, Earle, I said to Alice, Joe's wife, I said, I will try and tell the story briefly. Earle would have been up here for another half hour making this story work. But anyway, I've asked some dear friends to come up and help me play it for you. Tom Scott. A wonderful bass player, Abe Laboriel. And Mr. Johnny Friday on the drums. So we're going over to the... And Earle, if Joe had been here, he was going to give you the golf balls. Is John coming?
What's John? Is on a break?
Where's John? Oh, here he is. So I just want to say one more thing.
Exactly. Thanks.
I realized I was taking my life in my hands with Dave and Don Grusin here, and then I was standing by the door and in walked Ralph Grierson. So I said, could I send a sub? But you'll have to bear it. What was the temp?
I don't remember.
Great pleasure to introduce an award-winning actor and dear good friend who we haven't seen each other in a long time. So we've kind of made acquaintances again. Amongst his many other accomplishments, starred in a series which our honoree scored from I Spy. Please welcome Mr. Robert Culp.
When we first started I Spy, there were so many problems incumbent on the essential idea, of doing a realistic, as opposed to A Man from U.N.C.L.E., which was already on the air, and was based in exaggerated gimmicks a la James Bond. A realistic kind of secret agent type show, which was couched in comedy, essentially. B, much more significant, a black guy and a white guy, which had never been done. The problems incumbent on this were just catastrophic, so catastrophic that There were a dozen times, I suppose, easily. Sometimes I got it on the phone. Sometimes I saw it in person. When the show just said, well, there's no chance here. This isn't going to work. Early on, the team, so-called, was introduced to me and to each other and to Bill. A lot of guys who were like family there on that lot, the old Desilu lot, and had come from all those shows you've already heard mentioned this evening. And they'd worked together on these shows for, gee whiz, you know, years. They were going to come together and they would have something to do with the production of I Spy under the tutelage and the iron hand of Sheldon Leonard and the will of Sheldon Leonard, which was formidable, so formidable that he did manage finally to get this on. And among them all, there was a guy named Earle Hagen, whom I'd never met, never heard of. Instantly liked him, very likable fellow. In those first kind of frantic times, everybody on the lot was running around like a chicken with his head chopped off, carrying it under his arm, except Earle. I noticed finally that whenever Earle was present, Sheldon was much, much calmer than he was at other times. I swear to God. I'm not making this up, it's true. I remember it all these years. Carl Reiner, who was still working on the lot, said, let me give you boys, talking to Bill and me, just one piece of advice. Forgive me, Sheldon, I got to tell this one. When he comes down, Sheldon, in the morning, and he will, every morning, on the set, he'll come in. The second he comes in, stop whatever you're doing, sit down, talk, smile, have fun, and have a cup of coffee, and just stare at him. And eventually he'll go away and you can go back to work. This is the guy who was the executive producer and caused it all to happen. But he couldn't keep his hands off. And his hands, where we were concerned, were not the best hands. And Reiner knew that from bitter experience. And he said, for whatever you do, for God's sake, don't ever rehearse in front of him. You gotta think about that a bit. We pulled that off, and he finally got the picture, and he'd come down, and he would say hello in the morning and go away. And whenever Earle was with him, he went away quicker. Later, much later, I heard from Earle directly, correcting me on something that I had said having to do with the scoring of the picture or some other series. Wait a minute, don't you understand what we did on I Spy? I said, I guess I don't. Tell me. He said, no, this was, if not the first, one of the very first television series ever to be scored and toto, brand new every week. Total new score. Everything in those days was library. Not only was it cheaper, obviously, when you took your own library or bought it, but it was much faster, and things had to move as fast as they possibly could. It was television, and you had to be on last week. He said, no, that was a significant, I remember him telling me this specifically. It was a specific part of the budget, and an important one that Sheldon fought for tooth and nail, to keep the money in the budget for a full score for every single episode recorded brand new. I guess in history there have been very, very few of those, actually. I'm not an expert on that. And I have to make a confession to you. The truth of the matter is, I don't honestly know the difference between a straight 8 and a jazz 8. Kaz knows enough about it to make up for me. But I just sat at the table and smiled when I heard that. But the truth is, I don't know the difference at all. But One of my passions in life is movie scoring. I have a large collection, care about it a lot. And the one thing I do care about, despite my lack of technical knowledge, is what makes the picture work. That's my bailiwick. That's what I do for a living, or try to. And Earle Hagen made the picture work. Without him, I cannot imagine I Spy ever being able to achieve the rhythms that it achieved. Thank you, Earle, very much. Now, before we bring him up to the stage, let's take a look at a small sample of his award-winning themes and scores. If you'll please watch the screen, we'll see just a few of the over 3,000 television shows and movies of the week that were scored by this very, very talented man.
Gomer Pyle, USMC. Starring Jim Nabors as Gomer Pyle. Also starring Frank Sutton as Sergeant Carter. The Dick Van Dyke Show. Starring Dick Van Dyke. Rosemary, Maury Amsterdam, Larry Matthews, and Mary Tyler Moore.
That girl.
The American Society of Music Arrangers and Composers, it's my pleasure to present the Irwin Kostal Tribute Award to Mr. Earle Hagen.
Sitting at the meeting when Sheldon was talking to New York and they didn't want cars. And he said, "Did we don't do the show?"
That's after you called me.
That's it. Thank you very much. I haven't worked this room since 1939. If that sounds like a joke, it isn't. This was the Florentine Room, and Ray Noble and his orchestra opened it. And I was playing trombone and writing for him. I'm extremely pleased and honored to be the recipient of the Irwin Kostal Award. It's nice to be remembered, even more so when you're remembered by your colleagues and your peers. I think if someone were to look back at my 60 years in music, they would have to come to the conclusion that I had the best of several different eras in our business. I started to arrange in the big band era of the middle 30s and early 40s. And when the war broke out, I enlisted into a radio production unit of the Air Force at Santa Ana. We had a 65-piece orchestra to write for. And I can tell you with absolutely no fear of contradiction that in the 3.5 years I was in that outfit, I completely mastered the art of over-arranging. For those of us who were writing for the big orchestra for the first time, Morton Gould was a launching pad. We not only copied everything that he did, but where he had the good sense to quit, we didn't. Well, I'd like to describe a typical Santa Ana production number for you. We would start with about a 3 or 4 minute introduction, loosely based on the Pines of Rome. That would lead to a quick chorus of the tune, which we usually did in the Glenn Miller style so that the audience could relate and we could get on with our epic. And then we would finish with a spectacular ending which included the Firebird, the Bolero, the Rites of Spring, and occasionally the Saber Dance. Fortunately, we had a commanding officer who encouraged us to experiment. And in the service, there was no danger of getting fired. That big orchestra experience, however, came in handy for me because within a year after I got out of the service, I went into a 7-year contract at Fox working for Alfred Newman. Al Newman all by himself was an education. He was a marvelous film composer, conductor, executive, and in addition, he was a great guy. On that job, I learned my craft from Eddie Powell, Herbie Spencer, and Maurice DePac. And it gave me the opportunity to sit on the stage and follow the conductor parts of great film composers like Bernie Herrmann, Alex North, David Raxon, and Hugo Friedhofer. We were busy in those days. We were doing about 38 pictures a year. About 4 or 5 of those would be musicals to which Herbie and I would be attached. And when we weren't working on a musical, we were usually orchestrating for one of the composers on the lot. In those days, in that era, when the guys got together for a few drinks and a bite to eat at the luau, the guys were Ray Heindorf and Connie Salinger, Sandy Courage, Arthur Morton. So I could go on with a laundry list of names, and those were the people of that era, players, and they were wonderful. And I was privileged to be part of that. In 1953, the studios opted for a large screen production, and we went from 38 pictures a year to 1. There were others on the planning board, but they weren't immediate enough to justify the huge staffing that we had. So along with 1,199 other people, I migrated to television. There again, my good fortune held. I teamed up with Danny Thomas and Sheldon Leonard at a time when they were starting a string of hits that lasted 17 years. And when Danny and Sheldon began to back off, I continued on as an independent and worked for some wonderful directors and producers. My favorite is Ernie Frankel, who's here with us tonight, along with his wife Louise. And I must tell you that in that era, the composer was part of the creative team. His opinion as to the structure of the film and what music could do to enrich it was sought after and respected. I understand that's changed. And you know, that's unfortunate, because if what we do is diminished, so is the product. In retrospect, I think I got it backwards, because I started in the motion picture business and worked my way into television. But that was at a time when most young composers were cutting their teeth in television and looking toward the motion picture industry. But there was something about the immediacy of television that appealed to me. The idea of writing it one day and hearing it a couple of days later was attractive. Besides which, I was addicted to the narcosis, the ultimate narcosis in music, which is the rush that you get when you give a downbeat and wonderful players breathe life into something you've written. In my view, you can't synthesize a Kurt Rayer or a Felix Slatkin any more than you can synthesize a Bud Shank or a Pete Condoli or a Paul Smith. Because it's the personality and the humanity of what the player adds to what you've written that gives it its dimension. I think a statistic of which I'm most proud is that in the 33 years I spent in television, I was associated with some 3,000 shows, every one of which was recorded in Los Angeles with a live orchestra. It's my fervent wish and hope that that cycle continues to turn until it comes to a point again where those people who dedicate their lives to writing music can enjoy that fulfillment. I think it's traditional now to thank all the people who helped me along the way, but because of my advanced years, there's nobody left. I have one notable exception, however. 20 days from today, November the 23rd, Lou and I will celebrate our 58th wedding anniversary. Wait, that's not a record, unless you want to consider that I've been married for 58 years to a woman who claims to be 61. Lou has been a pillar of strength and balance in my life and also that of our children, and for that I gratefully thank her. I would also like to express my appreciation to ASMAC for a wonderful evening and thank all of you very much. Thank you.